All right, all right. I'm excited to see everybody today. This is I've known this one principle that I'm going to share today, and as I kind of dove a little deeper in research, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch of this. There's so much more we could go into. So another day, I'm really excited about the thought of maybe at some point doing another like brief class. Um, Maybe taking a couple days to look into the rules of improv. And I did not realize how much fun this would be. I didn't do theater. I didn't grow up in this world. Josh, did you do theater? Okay, I'm seeing you laugh. I'm wondering, like, maybe you did. I can see you like having Josh and I at camp were like each other's prank war buddies. So if I wanted to pull pranks on the guy's side of camp, I'd give him stuff and he'd go do it, and vice versa. Like so we have kind of a history here. But anyways, but I heard somebody speaking about this ages ago. I don't know where, and it just struck me. This is such a life principle. And today, as I was reading through the other principles, I'm like, there's like 20 main rules. I didn't know this. I'm putting a link up on the notes to the first 10 of them. And then they have in there like a link to more, but it was just kind of an opening article. And I've copied just a little bit in the notes. But I realized that, like, if we look at God as the author and perfecter of our faith, and we look at the Bible, I mean, he's writing this huge epic narrative, right, for all of time, but he's not doing it scripted. It's an improv. All of history is basically this master improv class with God as the all-time Zen master improv guru, like whatever you want to call it. And we are the players in it. And some of us play really well with improv, and some of us just kill the scene. And so I just, as I was looking through the improv thing, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so instructive. It'd be really fun, actually. Hey, Barb, to get some an improv group to like come in. I mean, it'd be so fun to really do like a thing where we actually got a chance to experience and practice some of these things and how it plays out in improv, and then kind of apply it to spiritual life, because I think this is like profound. Okay, so I'm going to contain my excitement on this and only do the first rule. It's really hard for me because this is super fun. So anyways, I'm going to read what they said about improv, though. It's an art. It's also a craft. A craft is something that is learned through practice, repetition, trial, error, and hard work. Much like any other art, skill in improv is acquired over time. The more time spent improving, the greater the improvement. But also, you could say improv and improve, right? It's kind of, hey, Lynn, it's kind of fun. So, anyways, that being said, there are rules which can, in general, make a scene better. As with any art form, you can break all the rules and still have quality scenes. However, those best able to break the rules are those who first learn and understand them. So I think we could rewrite that paragraph a little bit with like, improv is also life, and life is a skill and an art, but it's also like a craft. It's also, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I think there's a lot of connection there. Okay. So the first rule is say yes and. You never say no. And I'm sure a lot of y'all have seen that, like, whose line is it anyway? You get these ridiculous scenes. Like, I remember them doing I haven't seen it in a while, and I think it's kind of gone downhill in terms of like quality a little bit. But when I was little, we used to watch this like back when my brother was in high school. They would, like, I remember them doing a dating scene app, but they give them a box of hats. So they have to grab a hat, put it on, and do like a dating app. And like one of them draws the Wisconsin cheese hat. I mean, not Wisconsin, but it's like a cheese head kind of a thing, right? Now you can throw it back, but you kill the scene. So if somebody gives you a prop, the whole reason that improv works is you take this ridiculous prop and you go, yes, I have this and I'm going to make it work and I've got to go forward. So you take it, you can't deny it. If you go, I don't like that prop, you just kill the scene right then. You kill all the energy and the juice and the forward momentum. So you take the absurd thing that is handed to you and you say yes, and then you move forward. Come on, my phone's suddenly locked up. So and to be fair, that one he goes, I may not be the best, but I'm Buddha. I just thought that was hysterical. So he took the scene and he made, and it was funny because it was funny because it was ridiculous, and it was memorable because it was ridiculous, right? So they say for a story to be built, whether it's in short or long form, the players have to agree to a basic situation and setup. The who, what, and where have to be developed for a scene to work. Which, again, same thing in life. We have to kind of agree, this is my life. This is a situation I'm in for now. Like, I don't have to agree. I don't have to, it's not that it can't change, but you in the present, and there's more rules about you stay in the present, whatever, but in the present, you take the ridiculous scenario that you're given. By saying yes, we accept the reality created by our partners or by the Lord or by our life, and we begin to the collaborative process and form the start of a scene. And I love it because this is a collaborative process between us and the Lord, first and foremost. The collaborative process or group mind helps make us giants, animals, villains, saints, and more. Importantly, it puts us in situations that we would normally avoid. And I love, like Frodo says, like the best stories are ones we really wouldn't opt to be in. And so, but again, if Frodo had said no, and that may not be a comedic improv, but that's a story, right? And it's a life story. And if he had said, no, I don't want to go, then suddenly we don't have Lord of the Rings, or he's not in it at least. It kills the scene for him because all of a sudden he can't go forward with us. So the reason this works is because he says, okay, I will take this journey that nobody really wants, and I will move forward. And now we have these epic narratives, right? So I think I'm going to get really lost in this. I'm going to just stop there and say, like, let's look at the Bible a little bit. First off, I'm going to say that God is the master at this. So a lot of times we kill the scene and we say no to the situations he puts us in. I would say Zechariah yesterday was that kind of deal where God's like, you're going to have a baby. And he's like, they talk about questions are often a form of denial. It's a more subtle form. It's not a flat out no, but his response was like, really? So he asked a question, but it was kind of a no. And it would have killed the scene. But God's like, yes, I hear your question and I'll mute you. So he took the scene. So the Lord takes everything we throw at them. Yes, you're going to kill me and I will rise again. Like, look at the Lord. He never denies what we give him. He just receives it, accepts it, and then he goes forward, whether it's with a blessing or whatever. And usually it's blessing because God's a good God, right? So yes, you've denied me, but I will reinstate you, and I will love you, and I will help you move forward from that, right? There's always a yes and with the Lord. And then we look at, like, if you go through the Bible with these like rules of improv kind of in your head, like the great stories of faith, yes, we have thousands of people to feed and we have a Lunchable. Okay, here's your scene, go, right? I mean, this is a great improv story. And the disciples like, that's not going to work. And Jesus is this master of improv. And he goes, yes, and I will bless it and say thank you and watch it multiply. Like, that is not how we look at things. But if we can look at things with this comedic improv kind of mindset, okay, God is writing a hilarious or a really impactful or whatever kind of a scene. I mean, we tend to think of improv in terms of comedy, but you can do improv dramatic scenes too, right? But and if we took time and we went through all these other rules of improv, you would just see our life played out in all these things. But the first rule is that you don't deny the offering, you say yes and I think there's a gratitude in that. Like, okay, Lord, you're writing a great story in my life. I don't want to live a mediocre life. I don't want to have a story that's totally unforgettable. I used to love that For Him song where they said, I want to be a man that you would write about if the Bible was being written to this day. Like, that's the kind of life that song used to just wreck me. I want that kind of a story. And the beginning stages of that are that we sit down and we say yes and. So I'm going to give one little George Mueller did orphanages and Bible schools and all kinds. I mean, his life was just incredible, but in England. And, but there was a time when he had an orphanage and, they sat down to eat, all these kids to eat, and there was literally nothing to eat. And they sat down at a dinner table with plates. And he goes, we're going to give thanks for the food that we're going to eat. And they have nothing to eat. And so they decide to give thanks for the food. And then, which is just, again, I go, okay, if we're looking at improv stories, like, this is absurd. God's like, it's dinner time, sit down and give thanks. Okay. So they sit down, they give thanks. And then just as they finish giving thanks for food that they do not have, they get a knock on the door, and a bakery truck had broken down right outside the door, full of food. And they're like, and here's dinner. Because the guy's like, I hear you have a place, like all this food's going to spoil before we get a chance to get it anywhere. So we'll give it to you. I mean, the Lord just continued to show up because George had this like very yes and possibility. He saw so many miracles. And I think we shut down the miraculous when our response is no, or we grumble or we complain. But when we can come with thanksgiving, I think Thanksgiving is a form of yes and. Yes, I'm in this situation and I'm so grateful for what you're going to do. I may not know what it is, but I can recognize that you are this crazy improv master who like can show up, and I'm going to partner with you in it. By whatever situation you give me, I'm going to receive it with grace and say, yes, thank you for this Wisconsin cheesehead. And thank you for the scene you're about to write and my story with it. Like, this is going to be awesome. So, any thoughts on that? Anybody?
I've never thought of it as improv. It's a great way of looking at things.
I mean, it totally shifts things up for me. It's such a perspective change, isn't it?
Stacy, oh my gosh, like I love this. I love this. It's like putting I was just reading a spiritual a friend of mine does this thing called spiritual horsemanship, and and she's on a thing of doing 2 words, and those words, the first set was need and let, and this reminds me of that, like yes and oh my gosh, I love this concept, and I love to think about it in my life about how many times I've dreamt about something or had a desire about something, and then that thing shows up and it's yes and that's when it worked. Like, oh my gosh, like, God, you are so incredible. So I just love this. I love that. Thank you.
It has been such a fun, I mean, I love playing with this idea. And then again, I'd love to take time at another point after this and just really dive through, like, have a whole series where we just dive into the whole improv situation. Cause I think it's really interesting to look at all the rules, how much they can apply. And it's really, so yes, and I would say is just Romans 8:28. The Lord causes all things to work out for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes. God says, all the things you bring to me, no matter how bad, yes, a tornado wiped out your home, and I will use it to bless your life in some way. Not saying that that was a good thing. Half the things of improv are horrible things, but that's what makes it memorable. But the blessings that come out of it, right? It's the yes and
Yes.
happened, and I have plans to bless you. So,
You know,
Love that.
part of the improv that you didn't really touch on is the improv prayer, because so many times I've had some amazing times where somebody's praying and then somebody else immediately breaks into it going, yes, and I see this. And then all of a sudden you have this corporate improv of 5 or 6 people praying about something.
absolutely. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's so much to unpack here. I was kind of writing my notes beforehand and I didn't even get to them, but I started looking at, okay, if we look at Zechariah, what was the other story we looked at the other day? The Second Chronicles 20, yes, the horde is coming at you. And they're kind of like, we're throwing this one back on you. And he's like, yes, they are coming, and bring popcorn and send the worshipers, and they're like, yes. They could have said, no, Lord, we're scared, but they said, yes, we will go and we will worship. And then the Lord just says, and I will give you like multitudes of, or like huge amounts of spoil from the war. I just think it's really kind of interesting to read all these Bible stories, to keep going back through things with this idea of improv and like who kills the scene because they say no. Like I would say, okay, when Jesus, the young man comes to the Lord, the rich young ruler, and he says, what do I have to do to serve you? I've done all these things. And God's like, mentions a few, he's like, yep, I've done all that. And he goes, okay, sell what you have and give it to the poor. And he's like, no, can't do it. And he walks away. The story ends because he said no. If he'd have said yes, and like, what would have happened? Yes, that's a tough one, and I'll do it, and we'll see what you do, Lord. There would have been blessings back, right? So, but that was a scene killer for him. His scene ended at that point. But when they tells the disciples, drop everything and follow me, they said yes. And they did. And then all of a sudden, they're like part of this amazing story. So I think it's kind of an interesting thing. It doesn't change the stories, but it does put a whole different filter on them when we suddenly kind of start rereading them with some of these different lenses that we've talked about. But I do think it's kind of, to your point, Josh, this whole idea of our 3P experiment is this yes and. Yes, we're in the situation, and I'm looking for what you're going to do, and I'm grateful for it. So.
Stacy, yes. Oh my gosh. And and improv kind of just reminds us again that you don't know what's going to happen before it happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing when we let go and we let God. And it's like the creativity just starts flowing, and the joy and the laughter, and it's just another reminder of like, oh my gosh, this is how big God is. I have to do improv really to even sort of half keep up with you. You know what I mean? So I love this analogy. So good.
Okay. Well, I do too. So thanks for catching the joy on this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. And it brings and to me, it brings such an element of playfulness to the things that happen. Like your car, Josh, getting stolen. You're like, yes. And God's like, yes, and I'm gonna bring it back and in good condition and whatever. Now you've got a story. Like, and I keep going back to, Lord, you know that I love a good story. And it would be really a bummer for my life to be a lame one. Like I like a good story. So there have been times in my life where I'm like, I do not like this right now. I would like for this to work out, but I'm going to be honest. If I was writing the story, I would not work it out that way because I would say that was plot manipulation or a lame story or it was too convenient. I would work it out the hard way because I would want that gritty story. And I'm like, so I know what I'm in for, Lord, because you're a good author and you're not going to write a worse story than I would have, and I wouldn't write it that way because I know that wouldn't be a good story. So I think even just framing my life that way, improv is a little different, but because it's such like in the moment, but in terms of God being an author, like these ideas have actually really helped me. So I'm going to pray us out. And then if anybody wants to stay on and talk, I'll turn the recording off. But Lord, I thank you so much just for the creative, amazing ways that you can take the stories that we've already known forever, and then you can turn them into something like exciting and give us a fresh perspective to teach us something new, not because the stories were less exciting before, but sometimes we just get to discover things all over again. So I thank you for new lenses. I thank you for what you're doing in our hearts. I thank you for just revelation that all of the world speaks to you and you are hidden in all of these things. So whether it's art or drama or science or any math, like it doesn't matter, every discipline holds your truths within it. We just have to have eyes to see you because in you the whole world holds together. So I thank you for opening our eyes to the fun ways that you want to, playful ways you want to show up and delight us. And Lord, I just thank you that you are teaching us to have hearts that trust you when things look scary or ugly, or you're giving us a cheesehead that we wouldn't have accepted for ourselves. Like, that you help us to have these hearts that say, yes, Lord, I'll take that. And we're going to laugh about it. And what are you going to do about it? How are you going to turn this into something good? That we can see your playfulness and your joyfulness and your love for us, that there's nothing we throw at you that you can't turn around. You never like go no and you walk away. You're always engaging. You're always holding up. These improv rules are like literally, they're just kingdom principles that you are always holding up. And so even when we walk away from it, you keep saying, yes, I'll take that and then I'll make something good out of it. So we just thank you that because we are in your image and we have your Holy Spirit, you are able to give us the ability to do that. You are strengthening in us these muscles to learn to say, yes, Lord, and we're going to see what you do. So we thank you for the ways your goodness is working itself out on our behalves every day. In your name, amen.
Amen.
All right.